Hey friends, Elizabeth here from Plant-Based Bride, back again with another video. And today I am super excited to set up my bullet journal for February 2022 with a dark academia inspired aesthetic. I've wanted to do a dark academia theme in my bullet journal since it popped off on the internet and became a really popular aesthetic, but I've really struggled with figuring out how I wanted to actually execute this theme and what aspects made the most sense to include. In brainstorming what I could do for this theme, it occurred to me that it could be really cool to revisit that interactive flipping window thing that I did in my November plan with me last year. If you missed that video, you can check it out. I'll link it in the card and in the description box. But in that setup, I created a window so that you could flip between the inside and the outside scene. It occurred to me that recreating that interactive window idea, but in a completely different style, could be really cool, especially for anyone watching who maybe enjoyed that idea back in November but didn't necessarily vibe with the style of the art that I did on those spreads. And y'all know me, I love a challenge. I love to try to do completely different themes from month to month and really push myself, go outside my comfort zone. So that is what I'm trying to do here. I decided to utilize my silhouette cutting machine to make this window a little bit easier. So I used my craft sticker paper and I purchased an SVG file of a variety of windows. I'll link the Etsy listing for it in the description box if you're looking to use the same window, but I printed and cut the window out twice so that I could stick it on either side of the sheet. And then I just hopped into Silhouette and very loosely traced the window's shape between the outside and inside of that thick outer line to cut out of this cardstock, just to get this general shape of the window without having to try to cut it out by hand. I also cut a hole out of the sheet that I'm going to stick this onto and glued the paper down on both sides, lining up the hole. And then peeled off the backing and stuck down the window sticker on both sides, trying to line it up as perfectly as I could. If you wanted to try this at home and you don't have a sticker machine, I would imagine that an X-Acto knife and a cutting mat would be your best bet, but just make sure to be careful working around blades. I do not want to be the cause of any bullet journaling related injuries, so be careful. Once I had the window all finished, I wanted to work on creating shutters. So I popped into Photoshop and altered this window image, changing the color and adding hinges, little tabs to be able to actually attach these shutters to the page, printed and cut that out. And then I did a print and cut of the same image but without the tabs. Then all I had to do was get it lined up and stick it down using those little tabs, and I have little interactive shutters that I can open and close. Now I'm moving on to the cover page, and for this painting, I'm recreating an old photograph I found of a Paris street. And this photograph was taken sometime in the 1800s, and I just felt that the image was really interesting to see how sort of dirty and grungy this street felt. I thought the perspective was really interesting. There were a lot of details in different areas of the image that I thought would be fun to try to capture. And I feel like Paris and London in the 18 and 1900s is very much the aesthetic of dark academia. That's the setting of dark academia. So I really wanted to incorporate that grungy city cobblestone street feel into the cover page. I started by sketching out all the basic shapes using that photograph as a reference, and then went over all of those larger details using my Sakura Micron, and also adding in extra little details here and there to show texture on the walls, some cracks and marks, darker areas at the bottom of the walls where they've been dirtied just by being near the street, some wood texture, some cobblestones and brick texture. And then I left the ink to dry and prepped my watercolor. So for painting this, I actually only used dried paint that was already on my palette. I didn't have to add any fresh paint to my palette, which was really fun. And I had a little segment of my palette that had a tiny little mound of black paint and a tiny little mound of brown paint. And I used those in various combinations with various amounts of water for 99% of this painting, with a tiny bit of an addition of some orange and yellow paint that I also had on my palette already to add a little bit more warmth in certain areas. So I'm using quite a small brush and watering down the paint quite a bit. This is made even easier because I'm using dried paint that's on my palette. I have to add quite a bit of water to reactivate the paint, and that leaves me with a color that is pretty watered down and translucent. I'm trying to stick with browns and grays to really get across this dark academia vibe. Grungy, old, moody, traveling back in time. Everything is just a little dingy. I also decided to paint my wall and my shutters just using a flat brush with very watered down brown from my palette, just to add a bit of streakiness, a little bit of dirtiness, and almost a wood texture on those shutters. Once all that paint was dry, I started working on the interior scene. I had a lot of ideas for this, and initially I wanted to hand draw and hand paint these paintings, and then I realized that sometimes you can do too much. And I feel like painting these myself would have been a step too far, at least for my own capacity this week. So I decided instead to find some old paintings and some high-res images of gold frames, and used Photoshop to pop those images in the frames, printed them out, cut them out, and glued them in, just to give a feeling of an interior space at this time. And then I added some of my tea-stained paper, stamped February at the bottom, and added some washi tape just to give it a bit of a layered, textured feel. The way that I'm using tea-stained paper, other scrap papers, washi tape in the setup is very reminiscent of how I create spreads in my reading journal, and I've really enjoyed exploring more of a scrapbooky vintage feel in my reading journal over the last year, so it was really fun to incorporate this into my main bullet journal for a month. And I think it really does lend itself to that dark academia vibe. Flipping over to my next spread and starting by gluing down some scrap paper, tea-stained paper, and cleaning up the edges with my scissors. I'm also cutting out all my weeklies. I'm creating tabs as per usual. For those of you who are interested in the tab dimensions, this time I made my tabs 1 space shorter. So usually my tabs are 2 by 2 spaces for the diagonal sections and 4 spaces tall. This time I made them 3 spaces tall, just so that I could fit all my tabs in a shorter space vertically, because I am going to cut away the bottom portion of these weeklies to reveal the art underneath. This is another technique that I first tried in my November plan with me, and I've really enjoyed having these cutaways ever since, so of course I wanted to try that again here. I do find it really interesting how the age of social media that we live in currently is really creating all of these different niche aesthetics and lifestyles that are branching off of each other, and it's really cool to see people finding community, connecting with people online from all over the world who have similar interests, similar styles, similar reading tastes or music tastes. And dark academia as an aesthetic, as a concept, first appeared in 2015 on Tumblr and was a reaction to Donna Tartt's novel, The Secret History, which I have not read yet, but I believe it will be right up my alley, considering I am a big fan of dark academia vibes in the books that I read. It started as essentially a book club and an aesthetic that referred to types of books specifically. A gothic, dark vibe, focus on educational institutions, literature, art, poetry, with that sprinkling of darkness and mystery. Over the years, this has shifted into more of a day-to-day aesthetic, inspiring how people dress, the types of books people read, and how they live their lives. It's also been posited that the pandemic has played a large role in the popularity of dark academia exploding, as many students the world over have been forced to learn from home and are yearning for in-person education, studying in the stacks, sitting in the quad, discussing poetry with your fellow English majors. So many aspects of a traditional university that feels so far away right now. There is no one true definition of dark academia, and for that reason, I would be really interested to hear how you define it. What are the aspects of dark academia as a concept that jump out to you most, or what are the parts of it that bring you in the most, that you're most interested in or attracted to as an aesthetic? What draws you to dark academia the most? And what are the aspects of dark academia that are, in your opinion, the most essential? Adding my monthly calendar here, keeping it super simple. And then popping down to the bottom of the page where I am attempting to recreate the London skyline. Again, I found hand drawing from, I believe, the 1800s that I tried to generally recreate along the bottom here. I think dark academia has quite a bit of a focus on European architecture of the 19th and 20th centuries. So I definitely wanted to incorporate at least a little bit of that aspect into this setup. I'm also adding a drawing on the right side here. I found a photograph of the statue and did my best to recreate it. Again, starting with a pencil sketch using the photograph as a reference, and then going over that with my Sakura Micron in 005, which is quite a fine nib, to add all of those details. Again, once all of the ink was dry, I'm going in with those same 2 splotches of dried paint from my palette, brown and black, with varying amounts of water to make them darker or lighter, to fill in these buildings along the bottom. Again, trying to stick with those 2 shades in different combinations and different values to make this image more cohesive and also more representative of the time, because in that time period, the architecture was so often made of just a few materials. And if you look at representations of those time periods, the buildings are pretty exclusively gray and brown. And those colors are, of course, so overwhelmingly representative of dark academia as an aesthetic. I'm also going to fill in my sculpture with watercolor using black with different amounts of water added to get darker gray areas and lighter gray areas. I'm also adding some washi tape to these spreads, again, just for that more layered, textured feel that, for whatever reason, in my mind is closely associated with dark academia. It's sort of like a messy desk covered in a bunch of papers and letters and an ink pot that spilled across a notebook and a cup of coffee that sort of ties into that messy academic feeling. I'm setting up my weeklies here as well, of course, using my faux Dutch door rolling weekly. If you're not familiar with that, I'll link my video in a card and in the description box. You can check out the dedicated video where I explain how this setup works and how I use it. And as you can see, because I did that cutaway along the bottom, no matter which weekly I'm on, I can see my little London skyline along the bottom of the spread. Finally, flipping to the last spread of this setup, I'm doing a quote page on the left side and a final little drawing on the right. For the quote this month, I decided to pay homage to Edgar Allan Poe. I feel like he is possibly the epitome of dark academia, gothic vibes. And the quote I chose was, "And all I loved alone." There's definitely a bit of a bereft sadness and romanticism to dark academia, so I felt this quote fit perfectly. Working on this final drawing here, I decided to combine a bunch of elements that make me think of dark academia into a single little drawing. So a stack of books, a teacup, glasses, a pot of ink with a quill sticking out of it, and a small cracked statue. I wasn't happy with how my shading turned out on this little statue, so you'll see later I actually redraw the statue and glue it on top. And of course, I used more paint from my palette for this drawing. I did incorporate a couple new colors in this drawing that I haven't used anywhere else. I mixed a nice dark green using some dried up green and the black on my palette, and I used some dried up orange paint with lots of water to make a nice, soft, peachy tone. And with that drawing finished, we have come to the end of this setup. So I'll do a quick little flip through of all the spreads I created. This was quite a challenging experience, not the least of which because I pinched a nerve in my neck halfway through this setup and it was very painful to finish. But even working through the pain, I'm quite happy with how things turned out. It definitely gives me a dark academia vibe. It feels very earthy and old in exactly the way I'd hoped. So hopefully all of you enjoyed this setup as well. Give this video a like if you did, and leave an emoji that says dark academia to you in the comments if you made it all the way to the end. Before I go, I want to take a quick second to thank my patrons for their support. Extra special thanks to our newest patrons, Katie, Tracy, Lynn, Altharia, Ariane, Andrea, April, Victoria, Carrie, Montsolicious, Lucy, Aprilius, Asking Bard 93116, Brandy, FLB3RA, Jamie, and Julia. Welcome all of you to the squad. We are so excited to have you. If you at home want to join the squad, feel free. There's a link in the card and in the description box down below. And with that, I'm going to get going. Thank you so much for watching this video, and I'll see you really soon in my next one. Bye, friends.